we can look pretty, I guess.
Sit still, look pretty.
I can hear everyone.
Yeah. All right, folks, can you hear us now? Okay, thank you. All right, let's start over. Welcome to the Lovecraft eZine podcast. Sorry about the technical difficulties there. We'll do a couple things over. Ellen Datlow is our guest. Hey, Ellen. I know I've said this already. Ellen, did you move to a new place?
Yes, I did. And now you can see my bookshelves right behind me.
That
I
looks
moved way
great.
across town, Manhattan, from the far west side to the far east side.
Wait, so we no longer have to hear about your leaky gas oven, or?
Well, hopefully not. I mean, we'll never know. You know, it's like so far so good. And I'm on the 9th floor now and have an elevator, which is why I moved in the first place.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Well, Matt, tell us about the prizes again.
Okay, so first of all, I'm Matt Carpenter. I help run the eZine movie night. Kim Smeltzer loved Sator so much, she's starting a fan club, so contact her. All right, so our prize today is a double feature, The Will of Captain Crown. It's 2 books from a graphic novel. It is a pirate yarn. It's got some gore in it. It's not supernatural, but it's kind of interesting and fun. If you want to win this set, all you have to do is send an email to ezineprizes@gmail.com and put Crown in the subject heading. We'll draw a winner in about 6 weeks, and maybe it's you.
Kim says in the comments, STFU, Matt. I don't know. What does that mean, I wonder?
Basically, I think it means she's seeking attention. Like she says, I'm the diva because I'm starting a fan club and it was my idea.
Oh, okay. All right. Rick, you want to introduce yourself?
Rick Clay, writer and pulp magazine collector.
And Pete Rollick.
Pete Rollick, writer, and I don't know, I collect stuff.
Lots of stuff.
Yeah, lots of stuff.
I think we may have some more panelists joining us later, but that's it for now. I'm Mike Davis, and I'm not sure what my job title is. I want to thank all the patrons that I have. I've gotten a lot of patrons lately, and the number's really gone up, and I really appreciate you guys because you keep me doing this instead of going out and working for DoorDash or something. So thank you. Couple of quick things, as usual. Excuse me, my throat's really dry today. Even if you don't listen on iTunes, maybe you just watch on YouTube, or maybe you listen on Spotify or somewhere else. But first of all, we are on Spotify if you're unaware. And then secondly, if you go over to iTunes and leave us a rating, or a good rating if you are a fan of the show, that helps significantly. So I don't know why that is, but that is the case. So think about that if you can. Let's see, we've done introductions, and I think that's it for now, other than my son put a cool little thing that's called a super chat, and you can click the dollar sign in there and give me a tip. Let's say Rick says something brilliant, which he always does, then you can tip me. So that's how that works. So, all right, that's it for now. We're going to talk to Ellen. So, Ellen, you've got a couple of new anthologies coming out, right?
3, actually.
3?
Yeah. Well, don't forget the best horror of the year.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, November.
That's right. What number is this one?
I think it's 13. I'm pretty sure it's 13. I'm working on 14, so it must be 13.
Lucky
Yeah.
13. Okay. So tell us about so When Things Get Dark, stories inspired by Shirley Jackson. Do I have that title right? pretty close.
Yes, I believe so. Close enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stories inspired by Shirley Jackson. Yes. That's my arc. I have not gotten a copy of the book, but yes.
And the other one's a body horror one that I've not seen yet.
Body Shocks, and that's I forget the exact title, but it's Tales of Extreme Body Horror, something like that. But it's called Body Shocks, and that's from Tachyon. That's all reprint. The Jackson one is all originals. Someone was not aware of that on Facebook when I shared your post on my page. So yeah, the Shirley Jackson stories are all new. The Body Shocks, the Extreme Horror, that's all reprint.
Okay. I was thinking about the Shirley Jackson anthology, and it's one of those things where in hindsight, you think, why didn't someone do this before? Because it's such a natural thing, because she's such a huge influence. How did it come about?
Well, I go to ReaderCon every year, and the Jackson Awards are given there. And I don't remember exactly the discussion, but I guess I was talking to people probably, and someone must have suggested it, or, it came out of a conversation. It's like, oh, and that would be interesting to do an anthology inspired by Shirley Jackson. But I immediately thought, oh, but then I have to get in touch with the estate. What a pain. Because I didn't want to do it without them knowing. And so I kind of didn't do anything about that. So that would have been July. Just a few months later, at WorldCon in Dublin, I went to a party thrown by Titan Books. And I very unprofessionally actually approached one of the editors there who I was talking to. I said, can I pitch you a few ideas? And he said, oh yeah, please do. And I said, well, I'd love to do an anthology with you guys. I'd love to do a non-theme anthology. And he said, but you're not going to be interested because you just killed the Mark Morris series, New Fears, I think it was called. And he said, well, it depends on who you get for it, but let me see, let's talk after the convention. So we were back and forth, and eventually said, no, we don't want a non-theme anthology. But then I came up with some other ideas, and then they came up with the Jackson idea, even though I did not mention it to them because I kind of wasn't sure if I wanted to contact the estate. I just didn't do anything about it. And when they brought it up, I said, well, yeah, that's a really good idea, but but I really want to make sure that the estate is okay with it, that they don't want to yell at us and get mad and want to sue us or anything. And so I contacted the estate, Stanley Hyman. I had his email address, and he said, that sounds really interesting. And he Googled me and he said, well, you look respectable, kind of thing. And I told him who I was hoping to get for the anthology, some mainstream people who I did not, but, people who I was interested in. And he basically, informally gave me his blessing. It's like, oh yeah, sure. And so I went back to Titan and said, yeah, I'd love to do it. So that's how it came about. And I don't know how I don't know if there was an anniversary. I don't know what made them think about it, what prompted them to want to do it. Because I don't think it was any kind of anniversary of Jackson's or anything.
No, but there's been a movie or two about her lately.
But I don't think that was being done 2 years ago. I mean, when the idea came up. So I don't actually know what prompted them to think of it, but I'm really glad they did, because I probably wouldn't have done it, on my own.
Yeah. Guys, jump in with questions at any time. I don't want to.
By the way, I don't know who of you saw the movie, but I was very pissed off.
What's that?
I really thought the movie was terrible. I mean, I thought she was great. Elizabeth Moss, terrific, and the guy who played her husband. But I thought it just made a mash of who she was.
Oh, yeah.
It was not about her at all, and that was really kind of offensive. I mean, I'm really curious to know. I'm wondering how the actual estate felt about that movie, about her.
Yeah.
What was it called, Shirley? I don't remember what it was called.
Wasn't it? There was a The Haunting, the Mike, what's his name, last name?
Flanagan.
Yeah, The Haunting of Hill House. Didn't that come out about 2 years ago?
Did it? Didn't that come out years
About
ago?
2 years ago, yeah.
Really, that recent?
Maybe
Okay.
maybe 3 at the most.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe that's what made them think of it. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true, Pete. It could be that.
Could be a lot of things. Could be just zeitgeist.
Right, sure. And
Yeah.
and of course, and then I started thinking about, well, who's obviously being influenced her? And I immediately came up with certain writers who I was hoping I could get, and most of them I did. I'm the ones who I was hoping for. I mean, Kelly Link, I was really happy to get a story out of her because she seems most obviously influenced by Jackson's work.
Yeah, The Haunting of Hill House miniseries was 2018.
Okay, I don't remember exactly when. That would have been before we contracted to the book. So yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you see that, Ellen?
No,
Yeah, I was
was that on TV or was that a movie, a feature?
Was that
Netflix miniseries.
Oh, mhm.
Yeah.
Was it any good?
Well, it was, and it, in my opinion, okay, it was and it wasn't. I thought most of it was great. I hated the ending.
How many episodes was it?
I think it was 8.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Did it follow the original story? The original?
It was no, not at all. It was more like an inspired by. It was.
I think I heard about that. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He did. This is slightly off topic, but he did follow up a couple of years later with The Haunting of Bly Manor, which is inspired by. Help me out here, Pete.
Well, Bly Manor. But yeah, whoever wrote that, I can't. The name is skipping me right now. Whoever wrote that, I can't. All his ghost stories.
M.R. James.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. And I thought it would, if you're going to watch one of those, Ellen, watch The Haunting of Bly Manor on Netflix. It is just absolutely as close to perfection as I think I've seen in a miniseries in a long time.
Mike, it's Henry James.
It's Henry James, yeah.
Henry James.
It was Turn of the Screw plus
Turn of the Screw. That's what I was trying
Smell of
to.
Old Clothes and the Jolly.
Yeah.
Corner.
Well, but M.R. James did a bunch of ghost stories too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
But Bly Manor was Henry James.
Yeah.
With no relation.
Yeah.
Unlike
So-
William James, who was the brother of Henry James.
Mhm.
So do check that out. I think you'll thank me if you do. So, ghost story of sorts, of course. What could you just? My wife, as you know, I think is a high school English teacher, and they're about to read The Lottery, of course, by Shirley Jackson, and she loves like doing a lottery with the kids, and they're, you know, whoever wins, they're like, before they read the story,
Uh-huh.
and whoever wins, they're like, oh yay, I won, and then they read the story,
Say, oh,
and they're like, oh crap, I won.
What age is she teaching? Did they read it at?
15, 16.
Okay.
Yeah. Logan, if you're listening, the screen's gone black now too. So we're having pretty bad luck today. So, one second. All right, I'll keep talking to you while. All right, it's fixed. Okay. All right. Well, one of those days, I guess. Sorry about that, Ellen. Anyway, so you know, when they realize what they've won, you know, after reading the story, then they're like, "Oh crap, I won." So she's just such a huge influence. Could you talk a bit about the influence of Shirley Jackson, and you know, just from your perspective, your thoughts?
Well, I think she perfected. Well, she's not the only one who did it. Of course, there were women writing about domestic horror, domestic horrible things and dysfunctional families, ghost stories in the 1900s but she had a particular perspective of the 50s and 60s. Her nonfiction was as influential, I think, in a way as her fiction, her Life Among the Savages, telling about her family. The lottery, of course, made history because it's the most hated story, most controversial story that the New Yorker ever published.
Yeah.
And just that itself influences everyone's thinking about it. I'm going to turn my light on. It's getting dark here.
All right.
And you can just point out to all the writers who have followed in her footsteps, writing about dysfunctional families, domestic disturbances, secrets underneath the surface of calm 50s life. And I don't know. Is she the one person who influenced all that? I don't know. I wouldn't say that. But she's certainly a major influence on people who have been writing about it and thinking about it, and maybe reevaluating the 50s as being, this supposedly ideal time in American history, which is baloney.
Maybe if you're white and male. So,
Right? Well, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure it was that ideal even for them.
So with that in mind and her huge influence, what did you have in mind with who you wanted to ask to write short stories for this anthology?
Well, I wanted a variety of voices. First, I approached the people who I was pretty sure were influenced by her. And I also approached people who I thought might have been, and turned out some of them were not, and were not interested in writing about her, interested in writing for the anthology. They weren't that keen on her. But I didn't want just American voices. I tried to get a few people from outside our culture. And I did get a few, and I didn't know how they would react. Cassandra Coyne's story she's Malaysian, they're Malaysian, and their story is very much about an outsider coming to a small town. This sister and brother, I believe they're Chinese. They have lived in this small town for many years, and everything's fine and dandy, supposedly. And then the story opens with a mysterious murder, a kind of grisly thing. And everyone becomes suspicious of each other, but they're the first people who are victimized as the suspicion falls on them. Not that they necessarily did anything wrong, but they're odd because they're not from here. And are they really sister and brother, or why would they, neither of them married, kind of thing. So Cassandra does an interesting take from the outsider point of view. I didn't know what certain people would write. My publishers originally they asked me if thought I could get, I told them who I thought I could get, they wanted New York Times bestsellers. They always want that, a few. So I knew I could get Richard Kadrey, who's a friend of mine, has written for me a lot. But what they asked me for initially was a Sandman Slim story. Influenced by, I said, no. I don't know if any of you read Sandman Slim books, but they're urban fantasy about a Nephilim who comes back from hell and lives in urban LA. They're so un-Shirley Jackson-like. Yes, you got to be kidding. On the other hand, Richard did write an incredible Shirley Jackson-esque story that has nothing to do with Sandman Slim. And he managed to pull it off, and from a female point of view too. So that was nice that he did that. Maybe the most broad story farthest away from Jackson is Stephen Graham Jones's story about teens. It's kind of one of these stories around that it's roundabout kind of thing. It's like time travel almost. Did this happen or not happen? An alternative, basically alternatives, 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 I guess.
Alternative, maybe realities.
Well, alternate realities. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. And actually, he's
No
not.
problem.
Who did that? A few people did that. Carmen Maria Machado did that kind of thing too. Kind of an alternate, kind of the serpent eating its tail kind of situation. You know, what came first? Which reality is the real reality, or is either of these real? So a few people did that, and I don't know, but that to me doesn't seem. I don't remember Jackson's work dealing with that kind of thing, but you know, I haven't read that much of her. I've read a bunch of stories, and I read We've Always Lived in the Castle, but I'm not sure I've read anything that dealt with that kind of alternate reality. Have you? Have anyone?
No.
Not to my knowledge.
Yeah, but I mean, I basically tried to get a variety of voices, and I hope I did. You know, I think I did, and I'm proud to have gotten John Langdon's first. Well, he's not the shortest story in the book, but the shortest story I think he ever wrote. It was about 1,500 words, and he was on time, which is unusual.
I was about to ask.
Yeah, I don't know if
He's on
John's here,
time.
but John knows I've always been saying he's on time and he's short.
He's a panelist here sometimes, so I wasn't sure if he was going to show up today or not. But so on time and short. Wow.
Yeah,
From
yeah, and
John
not all the
Lang.
stories are horrific. A lot of they're mostly, I say, more weird and unsettling. I do think that Laird Barron's is totally horrific, but it's extremely subtle. And the horror builds and builds to the end, which is really horrific. But it's pretty subtle to figure out, to see what's going on. You know, and I'm happy with what I got from people. You know, and there are people who didn't come through, that they just couldn't finish the story in time, which is, you know, that's the way it goes. Or they didn't have an idea. I mean, I can't remember, there were a few people I asked, and they just didn't have any idea of what to write. So, you know, what can you do?
Yeah, well, that'll happen. Did you approach this one differently because of her huge influence as to who you wanted to ask, or did you start from the same baseline as you do with your other themed anthologies?
Well, I first approached the writers who I thought were influenced by her, who I think could write good stories about her, like Liz Hand and Kelly Link, and Karen Euler is a writer who's more known for mainstream, although she's published in science fiction and fantasy magazines and anthologies and collections. And she's a friend of mine, but you know, she's known more kind of mainstreamy, but her, you know, her story is Money for the Dead, and it's I think that's the title. Let's see, who else? Well, then then Paul Tremblay I was hoping to get. I mean, there are people who I wanted to get in the book. Oh, Joyce Carol Oates. I don't think she was necessarily influenced by Jackson, but I thought she could do a really good. Well, Joyce can do anything. So, you know, she's someone I would ask for something like that.
I was at a store today and I found a children's book by Joyce Carol Oates.
A novel or a picture
A
book?
novel.
Oh, okay. What's the title? Was it new?
I didn't pick it up.
Yeah. I mean, and you know, then I went up to some of my reliable people. Jeff Ford, I figured could do something. I mean, I didn't really think that that Laird could do a Shirley Jackson story, and he did. You know, I mean, the people who there are people who I approach with a lot of my ideas. Oh, Mary Rickert, her story is very much her story opens the book, and I realized reading Mary's work that she's definitely influenced by Jackson. I mean, a lot of she and Karen Euler, their stuff seemed very Jackson-esque to me, about seemingly normal people who are not. You know, so and the people who I thought, let me try them because they could do interesting takes. Like Gemma Files is more visceral usually, and actually she's pretty visceral. The story that she wrote for this was very visceral. But, I took a chance. I asked people who I thought, well, can they do something like this? And let's see if they're interested in what they come up with. So I'm the same way I usually approach it. I go after the writers who I work with and who I think might do interesting things. Josh Malerman has written a few stories for me now, and I really love his story for this book. To me, it also feels very Jackson-esque, Special Meal. It feels almost the most like The Lottery in a way, even though it's not the same setup at all.
Right. So I wanted to ask you this, and maybe this is just a question that just can't be answered, but and maybe I should have warned you ahead of time that I was going to ask this so you could think about it. But you've done a lot of themed anthologies over the years. Do you have a couple of particular favorites? Like I'm thinking about the doll one, for example, because I know you love dolls and you have a huge collection of dolls and so forth. Do you have a couple of favorites?
I do, and I mean, people have been asking me this. They never used to ask me this, but now they ask me because I've done a lot. And
right, because you've done so many now.
I have a few favorites. Supernatural Noir is one of my favorites, and I'd love to do another one like that. I really enjoyed it. And of course, and Inferno and The Dark. Well, The Dark was ghost stories, and I did Echoes. The thing is, The Dark in a way was more satisfying because it was tighter. The thing is, when I do a really large anthology, it's harder to juggle everything. And in a way, the theme becomes not too broad, but the stories become, in my mind, they become diffuse. It's harder for me to deal with them. And one thing I realized editing and trying to figure out the story order in large anthologies, it's much more difficult than doing it in 20 stories. It's harder to do 30 stories and put them together, not the editing itself of each individual story, but figuring out how they all fit together, than it is to do a 20-story anthology. Because it feels like it's getting out of hand and it's hard to control the theme in a way. The theme can get too broad. And although I enjoyed doing Echoes and I love most of the stories in it, in a way, because it's so big, it feels less sharp to me. And I just finished a monster anthology that's another big one, not as big as Echoes, but pretty big, for Nightfire. That's called, it's coming out in March, and there's little Screams from the Dark. And that's 29 tales of monsters and the monstrous. And again, it's hard for me to remember all the stories. Over a certain number of stories, I usually remember all the stories in my anthologies. I mean, not always, but if I read the first line, I say, oh yeah, I remember that. Of course I know that story. But when it's over a certain number, it's hard for my brain to keep track. I know this is kind of a weird kind of.
No, that's a lot of stories to keep in your head.
Yeah, I mean, but and it's like, I don't really get to know them until I work with them a lot. I mean, I'll read a story, I'll love it and take it immediately, or I'll read a story and I'll like it a lot and want revisions. And if I have several revisions before I actually buy the story, I'll get to know the story better. And of course, I start doing the line edit of each story. This is not for reprints, of course. This is all for original anthologies and original stories. When I start editing the stories a final time, preparing them for handing in the whole book. And I do that in the order of which I buy those stories, so they're farther away from me. So like the first story I bought, was months ago, and I'll start editing it, and I'll become more familiar with it again, and working on it word by word or line by line with the author will hopefully set it in my brain more. So the more often I read a story and work on the story, the more I'll remember the story and the details of it. And it's harder when there are a lot of stories.
Yeah, well, I ask you that question because I imagine my audience, taking their pencils out and writing these down, like Supernatural Noir is a very good one.
Yeah, and I want to do it again. I'd love to do another volume. I really love doing that. I enjoyed that one. And Inferno, I mean, I've loved my non-theme ones. Fearful Symmetries I adored doing, and I would love to do another one. Inferno was also non-theme. What was interesting putting together the monster anthology at the end when I had figured out the order of the stories in the table of contents, but then I had to, usually I'm the one who puts together all the stories in one big master file. And as I was doing that, I realized, I don't really read the stories again, but I do just see them obviously in passing as I move as I put them into the master manuscript. And I noticed that two stories I had next to each other had similar endings, even though the stories were very different. And I suddenly said, I can't do that. I have to move that. So I had to shift a few stories around after I announced the table of contents, but before I handed it into my publisher. So I had to move one of the stories further away. So that was interesting. It was an interesting exercise for me.
So let me ask you this: I know that your anthologies, your themed anthologies, are invitation only, correct?
Usually.
Yeah. All right. So for the beginning writer out there, they're not going to get a chance to be in a themed anthology. But what is
They could. I mean, it depends.
Yeah.
That's not a steadfast. It's not a rule or anything.
Right.
And I mean, I'll be reading. Don't forget, because I've been reading for the best of the year for 30 years or so. I have a good feel for what's out there and the up and coming writers whose work. If I see it, I will read it, and I might start seeing names over and over again, and then I will ask those writers to sometimes participate, write a story for me. And also in at least two theme anthologies, I have had open reading periods for a very limited time. And that was when Nick Mamitas and I did Haunted Legends, and he wanted to have an open reading period. I said, okay, if you read the stories, if you read them all and then give me like the top 20 or 30. And he did. And that was fine. I mean, I didn't mind reading 20 extra stories. And the thing is, what we picked, even though unknowns named, people we didn't know submitted stories. It was a blind kind of submission thing I think he took. But we ended up taking, maybe there was one story by someone neither of us had ever heard of. If that. I mean, usually we'd at least have heard their names and maybe had read something. I'm sorry, my cat maybe making them, he's stalking around.
So in other words, the best thing to do if you're a writer and you want to eventually get into a Ellen Datlow anthology is to do the work, to write, to submit your stories,
and send it to hopefully get it published in venues that are quote unquote respectable. There's so many publishers out there now. There's so many anthologies, and many of them are not very good. I mean, that's putting it kindly. And I know new writers want to get published and they're desperate to get published. Don't be so desperate that you let your story go where it's not going to get appreciated. And where no one, if like not self-published, but like someone who does it, who wants to publish their friends. And so they're doing that, but they have no sales platform. Because no one's going to see your story in that anthology. No one's going to see that anthology probably. So I think newer writers need to try not to be as desperate to get published and actually weigh where they want to be published and either be patient or hold the story for a while, and maybe just keep trying, but be aware of where you're sending your stories to be published.
Well, obviously, especially coming from you, that's really great advice. And, patience is the name of the game, the quality of the publication as well, as you just said. And
it doesn't have to necessarily be a paid publication. I mean, I'm definitely, people should get paid, but there have been publications that did not pay for reasons, whatever reason, like All Hallows did not pay. I don't believe it was part of the Ghost Strand Society, or was that a different one? I think it was.
Was it a charity thing?
No, not a charity. I mean, it was done regularly by the Rodents, and they did publish really great stuff. but I don't believe they paid. But so, I mean, so I do think writers should get paid, and I would not advise people to give their stories away. And actually, I have probably a negative feeling about charity anthologies, which we can talk about or not.
Sure, if you want to.
Well, I just don't think they're worth it. I think that you should just send your money to the charity, because when the net gross, I'm sorry, the net worth is gonna be little. First of all, there are very
Yeah.
few charity anthologies that earn out, that make any money whatsoever. And the money's not gonna go to the charity for a year or two, So what is the point? Just
Just give it to the charity.
go directly to the charity and give them money.
To
Yeah.
finish up the other thought, basically, if you're writing stories and you're getting published in quality publications, the idea is, you're pretty much the most high profile editor in the genre out there. And the idea is that Ellen Datlow keeps seeing your name and your stories in various anthologies when she's reading for best of the year.
Mhm.
So, and then, then maybe you get an invitation at some point.
Yeah, and sometimes writers or critics or just people I know who I respect will send me someone, a writer or a story, and say, you should read this. This is really terrific. And sometimes it is. And not always, but I mean, it's usually readable at least. And I'm talking about for reprint or original, I mean, I was sent a novella, but I don't want to talk about it much because nothing, I mean, I'm hoping that we buy it, but I haven't been able to get past. I mean, supposedly it's in the works, but I can't get the person who I need to commit to saying, yes, it's happening, to say, yes, it's happening. But anyway, someone sent me a novella, or sent me a writer and said, this person has a terrific novella. They were a student of mine. Will you read it? I said, yes, sure. And I love it, and I want it for tour.com, and I'm hoping to buy it, but I'm waiting to hear back, So that does happen, that someone I respect sent me something and said, this is really good, you should look at it. Yeah.
So when things get dark, if you're listening later, we're recording this on September the 26th, 2021. So it comes out in 2 days, right? On Tuesday, the 28th.
Wow. Yeah.
Good timing, right?
Uh-huh. Well, it was supposed to originally come out the 21st and was delayed a week.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. Yeah.
Well, the 21st would have been better. You know why? Because that was my silver wedding anniversary. And the first day of fall. So.
And we did a launch. Well, we did a reading that wasn't meant to be a launch, but it was going to be a launch because I realized it was the date of when the book was supposed to come out, but then it didn't become a launch anyway because the book was delayed. So yeah. Well, I'm sorry. Happy anniversary anyway.
No, thank you. Well, the point is, you can pre-order it. And as I've often said, pre-ordering really helps a lot for the publishers, for the editors, because they can see that demand is there. So, don't wait till Tuesday. If this is a book, you're going to read, then pre-order it now. That's a big help.
It's also on audio and on Kindle. I mean, on an ebook.
Right, on Kindle.
So yeah,
an audiobook.
The audiobook, I think it's on Audible. I think if you're a member or something, you can get it free. I'm not even sure. I hate saying that, but I think you can.
No, I'm a member of Audible. Basically, it's probably a credit. There's a plan.
I don't know how it works.
Yeah, I'm on the two credits a month plan.
Oh.
And so it kind of works out to $11 a book. Okay. So then you got a lot of books that are audiobooks that are like $30, $40, $25.
Right.
So if you listen to a lot of audiobooks, which I do, you're saving quite a lot of money.
Yeah. I mean, I don't listen to audiobooks, so I can't judge them, but someone told me that they had different readers were reading from it and they did a good job. So that's good to know.
Oh, you've got different readers for different stories for this.
Apparently. I mean, I don't know how many readers there are. I don't know if there are a limited amount of readers who read a few stories, or one different one for each story. I doubt they do that. So
Yeah. Well, I think that's great. Not just one audio reader for the entire anthology. Pete, Rick, do you guys have questions about this? Comments? Go.
So I wanted to go back to something, Ellen, that you mentioned earlier. You had people who.
Peter, wait a second.
What?
You look so nice. You're all dressed up, handsome today.
I know.
Did you dress up for Ellen?
No.
He dressed up in disguise as John Langan.
Yeah, I'm spending John Langan.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's just this sort of modicum of respectability, just. But no,
Langan has a modicum of respectability. Are you sure?
Well,
Only when teaching.
Stukan. So, you mentioned earlier that some people couldn't deliver for the book.
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle that? Do you just adjust the size, or do you?
Well, what I try to do with most of my anthologies, I usually ask a third more people than I need.
Okay.
Not always, but you have to assume that people are going to drop out or not have an idea, or I'm not going to take the story for whatever reason, that it doesn't work for the anthology. So I always ask more than I need. And it's rare, luckily, that everyone does produce. And if they do, that's the only time when it's a problem. It only happened once, actually, when Terry and I were working on Queen Victoria's Book of Spells. And I think everyone came through except several were late. And so we turned down the ones that were late, even though we liked the stories. It's like, yes, you can accommodate some extra wordage, but you can't accommodate 5 extra stories.
Right.
Because it depends on first of all, it depends on what was contracted for. Most of my anthologies are supposed to be between 90,000 and 120,000 or so. That's what I aim for. Mm-hmm. And if it gets too large, it's going to cost more. And unless the publisher wants it to be really, really big, that's not a good thing, because, it hasn't been planned. I screwed up. I mentioned this in another interview recently. I screwed up on Best Horror of the Year when I took, years ago, I think it was the year's Best Fantasy and Horror, I believe, not the Best Horror. It was when I took Peter Straub's Ballad of Ballard and Sandrine, which is a novella. Oh, wait, no, it wasn't that one. It was Mr. Club and Mr. Cuff, which is much longer, I think longer even than Ballard. And so it was year's best, and it was Mr. Club and Mr. Cuff. I gave them the wrong information at the last interview, which is huge. I don't remember I have no idea what the word is, because first of all, we didn't count by computers, then you're supposed to count, the number, blah, 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 multiply. And I'm a lousy counter when it came to pages. Now I just use Word, and too bad that's what Word says, that's what it is, too bad. But I used to try to manually count everything. And it was so big that it was too long for the book. We had to knock out a few stories. One I had not committed to yet, which was okay. It was a foreign story. I don't remember, by someone I never heard of, and I liked the story a lot, but I didn't have to deal with the writer. Another one was I knocked out a Jack Ketchum story, which I really liked. And because I was friends with Dallas, I thought he would be okay with it. I hoped, and he was. He was so great about it. He was really, really gracious, and I might have cut one other story, but I think I only remember having to deal with Dallas. I don't remember if I had to tell anyone else, well, I'm not using your story. Haha, It's like, and it's like, oh no, what did I do? But I loved that novella, and it's like I wasn't gonna not take it. I'm curious now to know how many words it actually is, but it was huge.
I do remember reading that. That took some time.
Yeah. So you have to be careful. You have to be aware of that. I was worried. A lot of people didn't come through for the monster anthology. And that was supposed to be big. That's supposed to be, I forget what we actually decided, 150,000 words or something, 160,000 words. And everyone was late for that. and like 5. Usually my stories come in on time, except for John. But I know that John, I have to hold.
Poor
But everyone
John.
else usually comes in on time.
John, you had the opportunity to be here to
He
defend
knows
yourself.
that. He knows he can't argue. He knows it's true.
No, he knows. Yeah, we tease
Yeah.
him
But
about it all the
anyway,
time.
So what you guys don't know is that John.
and his story is really short. So it's like, oh, John, you could have written a really long story, but you wrote a really short one. Oh no. But anyway, I was really worried that I wasn't going to have enough wordage because they kept saying, is it going to be on time? I said, oh yeah, sure. It was due, I think, September 1st. And I was thinking, it's not going to be done on time. I'm missing I'm missing 30,000 words, It's like, what the hell am I going to do? Actually, at the last minute, I'm talking about using new writers who I haven't used before, who I haven't solicited before, but I've done reprints. At the last minute, I won't mention the person's name because, why? But I did, at the last minute, I solicited, maybe a couple of weeks before the book was due, I solicited a story from someone and said, do you by any chance have something on the back burner that you're thinking of, a monster story? And they did, and they sent me one. It's like, and it came out that the wordage was fine, but boy, was I nervous about that. I was afraid it was going to come in too short. So that was because, as I said, at least 5 stories were late. And I had to sit on some people. I said, you're not dropping out. You're doing this, and I want it now. You've got to get it to me now. And I forget who the last people were. Well, I'm pretty sure. I think Laird and Livy were the last people to get their stories in this time.
So
and usually they're pretty much on time.
So the funny thing is that what you guys don't know is that John is now 2 weeks overdue on giving me a blurb.
A blurb?
Yeah, I knew that.
So
good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah. I told you, well, you were here. I told him about it the other night. So he's like, yeah, I'm working on it.
Yeah,
So.
I bet. Sure.
So then let's talk around. Rick, do you have anything on this before we continue?
Yeah, I do have a question.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Back to Shirley Jackson. Most of us casual horror readers know her from The Haunting of Hill House and The Lottery, and don't know anything else. What works would you recommend by her that besides those 2?
I haven't read that much of her, I admit, but I loved An Ordinary Day with Peanuts. I love that story. I believe I read Life Among the Savages, which is, it's nonfiction. It's a memoir about her living with her kids. I forget how many kids there were, and the chaos of being a housewife and being a writer, and it's fun. It reads like fiction because it's so well written. And it might have even been made into a movie. I'm not sure. We have always lived in the castle. That's really great. And that I'm not that widely read with her. I read her biography recently. It was interesting. And Stanley comes across. Right, her husband. Oh, I just realized. Wait, is Stanley her husband? Then what's the name? If Stanley's her husband, that's not who her son is. But anyway, I think I confused the 2. I forget someone's name I'm missing. But anyway, I haven't read that much by her, except those. I mean, I've probably read her short stories, but don't remember a lot of them. I just started reading her letters. And they're very interesting. Her letter. But no, definitely if you have not read, We've Always Lived in the Castle, read that. And what I like very much, what I realized rereading An Ordinary Day with Peanuts is that I believe Clive Barker was influenced by that story. And I may be wrong. I actually should contact Clive and ask him, because his story, now I forgot the name of it. But have most of you have you read Clive Barker at all? His stories, his short stories?
Sure.
The one with the fraud, with their
Sure,
the one with the fraud, with their
Sure.
the one with the fraud, with their the one with the fraud, with their I can't remember the time of the fraud, with their I can't remember the time of the fraud, with their I can't remember the time of the fraud, with their I can't remember the time of the fraud, with their I can't remember the time of the fraud, with their I can't remember the time of the fraud, with their I can't remember the time of the fraud, with their I can't remember the time of the fraud, with their I can't remember the time of the fraud, like I can't remember the time of the fraud, like I can't remember the time of the fraud, like I can't remember the time of the fraud. Okay.
Ellen, it's Babel's Children.
Thank you. Yes, that's it. Thank you. I think I reprinted that in Omni years ago. I also, the Book of Blood I published there too in Omni. So, thank you for looking that up.
It's somebody's job.
Yeah, I think this podcast is haunted. We've had several problems. Why don't we move on to you've got this body horror anthology coming out. When is that coming out?
That's coming out, I think October 12th, but I'm not sure exactly. I can't remember the exact date, but I believe it's October 12th. And that's from Tachyon. And
I'm reading it right now.
okay, and it's not, I think it's, to me, it's filled with stories that you don't think of necessarily as body horror. I mean, to me, body horror has always seemed extreme, even though in the subtitle it says extreme. They it's what I think of. I'm not ordinarily into body horror. I am afraid of body horror. I mean, I have a real trouble with movies like The Thing.
Me too.
The remake of The Thing by Carpenter because of the mutilation. And that's something I have a hard time with. I have to assume that Jacob suggested it because I can't imagine I did. But maybe I did. We came to an agreement. And what I did is I found that I realized some of my favorite stories are body horror, like Ed Bryant's Transfer and Michael Blumlein's story, Tissue Ablation, blah, 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 which is basically a dissection of, a vivisection of Ronald Reagan, although his name is never used. It was written while Reagan was president, and Michael, who was very angry. And I think it was his first published story. It was an Interzone. So, I mean, I knew right away there were certain stories. This is how I do a lot of theme reprint anthologies. I'll think of the stories that I believe work with the theme that I like. I mean, the stories that I love. And then what I'll do is I'll go to various authors who I've worked with, who I think will do the kind of story that I need for the anthology. And I'll just do a mass mailing, saying, do you have anything that can be considered body horror? If so, let me know or send me a few stories. And so some of them sent me like 3 or 4 stories. Richard Christian Matheson does a lot of body horror, and they're usually very short. So he sent me a bunch to choose from. Even Stefan Jimenowitz, who is my historical helper in everything, he actually sent me about 4 or 5 PDF files with very badly scanned stories of public domain stories that I ended up not using, that were kind of body horror, that I just didn't feel they fit in the anthology, and I didn't need them, So, then I went after certain people, and then someone else that'll prick my mind and say, oh yeah, that person might have written body horror. And then sometimes I'll just go to writers who I like, whose work I like, and just say, have you done any body horror? And they'll say no. Now, sometimes that's true and sometimes it's not. Like I've gone to writers for other theme anthologies, reprints, and said, do you have anything on this theme? And they'll say no. I said, well, wait a minute. What about that story? Blah, blah. And they said, oh, I guess so. And they sent it and I took it. That might have been for, it might have been for Tales of Wonder and Imagination. I'm not sure, but there was a story, I think by Nick Royal. He said, no, we had nothing in the theme. I said, are you sure? You know, what about this story? Doesn't that have something to do with the theme? And it did. So I took it, you know, and sometimes it's serendipity. Someone will recommend another writer and say, well, what about this story? You know, I read this and I think it's really good body horror. Do you want to take a look at it? I'll contact the author and take a look at it. So that's how I do
Did you
that.
say that the body horror anthology, that's reprints?
It's all reprints, yes.
And so then the other thing you have coming up is the next best horror of the year, number 13, you think?
Yep.
When is that coming out?
November 19th. I just looked it up. I think it's November 19th.
Okay. Anything you want to say about that? I mean, you do this every year. And
Well,
it's always-
I love doing it and I love finding new writers. I mean, every year I do kind of an overview at the beginning. I started doing it maybe 10 years ago, saying this is how many male to female writers, just to see the difference, to see what I've got. Because when I started editing the best of the year's best fantasy and horror, generally it was overwhelming male. The stories I picked were by men, and only in the last 5 to 8 years it's become much more even. It's almost parity, if not. I mean, this year I think it's pretty close, and it's not something I think about when I take the stories, but I'm pleased that it is happening. I also kind of just point out where the various writers come from. If, you know, there are 10 Americans, 3 Canadians. I mean, sometimes, I don't remember if it was this year or last year, it's overwhelmingly Brits. You know, you just don't know. It's what hits me. Sometimes there are people from, I'd say it's usually Great Britain, United Kingdom, Canada, America, United States, sorry. And some people, Europeans call it America. No, it's like sometimes I forget that we don't because they're Canadians. And Australia, you know, so that's where most of them come from. But you know, it's interesting if when something comes from someone else. And there are expats who live, you know, Richard Calder, I think, lives in, well, I don't know if he still does. He used to live in Thailand.
And you read a hell of a lot in order to.
Well, I now have a few people helping me read things.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, I have someone who's dedicated to reading online stuff for me, or I mean, not all the online stuff, but the online stuff that's not horror. Like I read Nightmare Magazine and The Dark, but I'll let them look at the Lightspeed and fantasy and Borealis, because I rarely find horror there. But I need to have someone look at it in case there is, and sometimes there is. Yeah, so.
Do you tell those folks what to look for, or are these people you've selected because they just are more in line?
They know. Well, they're people who like horror, for one thing. I mean, it takes a while to train them. You want to make sure that they send you something, you know, and sometimes they'll oversend things. That's good. I'd rather have them send too much than send me nothing, you know, that they like nothing, that they nothing is good. I have one person who reads anthologies mostly. I have 2 people, well, one person reading magazines that are not going to be probably not going to be horror, like Asimov's. Asimov sometimes has a Halloween issue. Sometimes they have horror in there, but I'll look, Analog, Hitchcock, Queen, I'll have a reader look at that. You know, I mean, I have found stories in Analog. I think I took a story once from Analog, so you know, I can't ignore them. And then you know, certain anthologies, I'll have people check out for me, and they'll say you should read this and that and the other thing. And it's helpful because there's so much. Every year there's more and more to read, and it's getting tough. I mean, I'm even, you know, like in the last 2 years, I've had people send me printouts, or not, sorry, Word files of podcasts. But it's like, I think there's one that's like does a podcast every week. I do not want 52 stories. You have to pick the top, whatever. I just can't read 52 extra stories because you're doing a podcast a week. Just give me your top 10 or your top 15, then that's all I'm looking at. I can't make a choice.
You know, I think my very first interview with you, Ellen, was about 9 years ago. And I remember asking you about what you read for enjoyment. And you said that something along the lines that you don't have time to read for enjoyment. You read for work because you have so much to read, like for the best horror of the year, for the themed anthologies and so forth. Has that changed, or is that pretty much still the same?
Well, what I try to do is I don't read that many novels a year. So what I try to do is choose the novels that I think I can cover, I can justify covering, and that I think will be horror. I just bought this. I don't usually buy books. I hate buying books. But I actually just bought this because I realized I saw the original movie with Tyrone Power and Joe Blondell, right? And it's being remade with Bradley Cooper and Kate Blanchett and Rooney Mara. And I realized someone did an article. Crime Reads is a terrific website because I don't only cover crime. But anyway, I think it was probably Crime Reads, or someone did an article about the book, Nightmare Alley, which I realized after they described it that it's very different from the movie, and I'd never read it. And so I think this reissue came out a couple of years ago. It's introduction by Nick Tosh. Oh, it came out a long time ago. It came out 2010, which I didn't. It's from the New York Review of Books. But anyway, because a new TV series or a movie, a miniseries is coming out of it, I'm going to justify reading it and covering it in my year's best. Ha ha. But I try to combine it. I mean, there's certain writers who I'll read no matter what, even though they're not appropriate, like Bill Gibson's work I love, and the fast reads. And I know that I can't really cover them for the year's best because they're not horror. I read all of Liz Hand's books, her Cass Neary books I cover usually. Richard Kadri's. I covered the first couple of Sandman Slim books. Realized that they're more dark fantasy than horror. And so I mentioned them, but I actually covered the last one. I mean, the last one just came out, just has come out or is about to come out. King Bullet, it's the last in the series, so I'm covering that. So I try to combine my interests with what I have to read, basically.
Right. Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, if my memory is wrong, but you also, I think, told me that in general, there are exceptions, but in general, you do prefer short stories. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to say because I don't read short stories for fun. I mean, I would never.
But you enjoy most of them when you read them, though, right?
Well, but it's my job too. It's a good thing I love doing it because it's my job. But I would not pick up a collection of short stories just to read. I realize.
On the other hand, you do get paid to read, which is sort of a dream job for a lot of people.
Right. I mean, yeah, I've been reading short stories for the year's best for 30 years. And I love reading them, but I mean, it's a fun job. Yeah, it's a job, but it's fun. I mean, I enjoy it. I'm always burnt out by the end of the year, by the time I'm picking out the stories. And I'm really behind this time because of the anthology that I'm working on. I have to really catch up on my short story reading. So I've been working on that.
One of your readers is Stephen Desmankiewicz.
I'm sorry?
One of your readers is Stephen Desmankiewicz.
No, I'm talking about Stefan Jemenowitz. No, he is not my reader. No, Stefan is sometimes he'll help me ghost my intros. No, he is he works for Sterling Publishing, which is the anthology division of Barnes and Noble. Okay. And he knows all the history of classic horror stories and novels. But anyway, when I've worked on reprint anthologies, like he actually found me some public domain stories for Echoes, the ghost story anthology, and I took 2 of them. One by Ford Maddox Ford and one by Chambers. Robert Chambers, I think. No, it's called the Yellow Chamber. It's called the Wide Birth, and maybe it was by Chambers. But anyway, no, he doesn't read for me. I mean, he helps me out when I'm, for suggestions occasionally.
My mistake. I'm sorry.
That's right.
So
Stefan's an expert,
yeah,
so-
well, so the funny thing is, I'm dating myself, but through the 80s, he did a lot of Bonanza books,
Oh,
Weird Tales, Rivals of Weird Tales, and
mhm.
when I was forming the first parts of my collection, he was a regular guy on the shelf.
Mhm.
And then just last year, I was clearing out some duplicates from my collection, and he bought a Charlie Chan novel from me.
Oh, does he collect them? He must collect Charlie Chan.
I guess.
He must have a huge collection. I don't know where he has it. I don't know if he has an attic or a basement or what he does, but he lives in a house someplace in New Jersey, I think. Yeah, so he has a huge collection of everything, of pulps, of magazines.
Yeah. This was
everything.
one of the Charlie Chan knockoffs by Michael Collins.
Mhm.
Is he married?
Yes, he is, and I don't know how his wife is. Yes, I never met her. And we have not talked about her feelings about his collection. I don't know where he actually keeps his collection, but I assume it's in the house someplace.
Yeah.
I have a lot of print books, but
They have
I
no
also enjoy Kindle, and my wife loves it when I get Kindle books.
Uh-huh.
So,
Well, I still have a storage locker I would really like to empty, but it's filled with my own books.
talk to Pete. Pete Rollick is the guy to talk to.
Oh, stop.
Periodically, I have a sale. Like I have a book sale going on right now.
Yep.
Go and see what I'm selling on my Facebook page.
So
I wasn't going to mention this, but since Pete said that he was dating himself, I stumbled across your Wikipedia page today. I wasn't really trying to go there, but I ended up there. And I'm not going to mention your age, but I was shocked because I thought you were in your late 50s.
No.
So, and I was like, whoa.
I have good genes. What can I say? Believe me, it's not taking care of myself. I mean, I don't drink that much or smoke, but that's, it's not anything I do to keep healthy. Trust me.
All right. So
my mom's in great shape and she's 94.
Yeah. All right. So you still have a long time on the planet. Yeah, that's good.
I hope so.
All right. So when things get dark, stories inspired by Shirley Jackson, that comes out in 2 days. So if you're watching live or watching this before then, please pre-order it. And obviously, if you're watching later, order it. This is going to be all of Ellen's anthologies are great. I really mean that when I say that, but some like Supernatural Noir that you mentioned and the Shirley Jackson one, to me at least, are extra special, and I think this is going to be one of those. So yeah, pick that up. And then you got Best Horror of the Year coming up in November, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the Body Horror is when did you say?
Body Shocks is coming out in October.
Body Shocks.
I think okay. October. Wait, let me see. Oh, good. I have a review right here. Oh, it doesn't say the actual dates. Here it says only October 2021. I think it's October 12th, but I forget. It got a great review in Locus. A beautiful, much more generous and necessary review. That actually gave me credit where I don't believe I deserve it.
Anything else that we didn't cover about this or anything else that's coming up that you'd like to mention before we let you go, Ellen?
I can't think of anything. Does anyone else have questions? Anyone in the audience? Is there anyone in the audience who has questions?
Chelsea did mention one of my viewers, longtime viewer, very loyal listener, said, I would like to hear Ellen's opinion of my theory that Lovecraft is slipping a bit in popularity while Shirley Jackson appears to be in vogue recently.
Lovecraft never goes away.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not going away. His influence is not going away. And I think that's fine. I mean, the influence has brought new voices into the field, into the subgenre of cosmic horror. And I think that's great. But he created worlds, and whatever, I can never talk about trends. I know nothing. I can look back, but I have no idea what's coming. But I think that, his influence is not going to wane.
Right.
And I think I'm really pleased that Jackson is getting her due, but I know what I was going to say. I have a friend who visited me who's not in the field at all. And I mentioned I was doing the Shirley Jackson anthology. He did not know who Shirley Jackson was, and I did not believe him. I still don't believe him. He said he never read the lottery. He never heard of. I said, you read the lottery in school. You did. Believe me, you did. And he insisted he never heard of her. He didn't know anything about her, and I just don't believe it. But I mean, I guess there are people out there who never read the lottery or never heard of it. I mean, he's our age or your age, whatever. He's my age, actually.
So literally my 13-year-old came to me on Friday and said, Dad, you're never going to guess. Today we read The Telltale Heart and The Lottery.
Okay, see? I'm sorry. That's why. And this is a guy who's well educated. I mean, he went to Dartmouth, I think. It's like, how could you not have heard of Shirley Jackson? How could you not have even heard of the movie The Haunting, or read The Haunting of Hill House? Or this is impossible to me.
Some people's brains, including some very intelligent people, they tend to focus on what their focus in their life is. And maybe they've read a Shirley Jackson story in school, but it doesn't register because it's not important to them.
Right. But I just find it hard to believe.
Yeah.
It's like, eh.
Yeah. So anyway, I've read some of these already, and I've got a print copy coming in the mail.
Good.
That I think Danielle's going to steal for school, since she's reading the lottery. But yeah, it's a really special one.
Good.
So yeah, buy this one, guys. So you'll be glad you did. And anything else before we let you go that we're missing?
Not that I can think of offhand.
Yeah, I was going to say, when I get interviewed, I hate that question. What do you think is next for XYZ? I'm like,
I have no idea.
I don't know.
I'm hoping to sell another anthology too. I have nothing on board. I have nothing, set up yet.
I predict that more horror fiction will be written.
Right. And
I think I'm safe saying
I hope I will be editing more horror. More stories, another anthology in the future, but I don't know what or when. So I mean, that's the problem with publishing. You work on something like all this year I was working on the monster anthology and The Year's Best, and the other two were coming out with production. So I didn't have time to start like selling one for next year. It doesn't work that way. And now it's like, oh, I'd like to sell a few anthologies, and either someone will commission a couple, one or two. And the thing is, I always try to stagger them, and they always would do what at the same time, no matter what I do, no matter how I stagger them. For some reason, they all are due on approximately the same month.
Well, thanks for being on the show today. It's good to see you again.
It was a pleasure.
Your new place looks wonderful.
Thank you. I'm really happy here. I love it. And the cats like it too.
Yeah, how many cats do you have? 2
at any given time.
Well, you got a nice set. For those who are listening later and can't see, Ellen's got a nice floor-to-ceiling set of bookshelves, several of them behind her.
They're not quite floor-to-ceiling. Wait, hold on. Oh, you can't. Yeah, see?
Almost floor-to-ceiling.
There's room enough for Jack. Well, there was room enough for Jack to go across them. However, I think he realizes he's too fat to jump now. He has to go from some furniture. He can't go straight up; it's too high. But I have furniture. I can't see it's that way. Okay, I have a piece of furniture that he could jump up. But I think he's finally realized he's too big to get up there, and I'm happy that he's not jumping. I'm afraid he'll fall because he had to go catty corner. He had to go he had to jump from one spot way across, and I'm afraid if he fell, he'd get impaled on something. So I'm actually glad he stopped trying to get up there. for now.
Well, I'm a cat person too, and as you know, the home actually belongs to the cats, and they let us live there.
Of course,
So,
well, sure, yeah.
so
But thank you so
Right.
much for having me.
oh, thank you for coming on the show. Again, guys, buy When Things Get Dark because it's good. So, yeah.
And I'll
Thanks.
see you next year. We can talk about when Screams from the Dark next year
Yeah.
when it comes out.
All right. Well, thanks, Ellen, for being on here, and we will talk to you sometime soon, I'm sure.
Good to me. Great.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Ellen.
Bye.
All you got to do is close your
Oh, I
Zoom
know. If you
window, and
stop
then you're
recording.
good.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Speaking of Langan, we were talking about Langan. Mr. Gaunt. For those of you who don't know, Mr. Gaunt was John Langan's first collection, and it's
Impossible to find.
well, it's not impossible to find. It's impossible to buy because you can find it on eBay or Amazon for like hundreds of dollars. But Word Horde's about to re-release it in print and Kindle. So
It's amazing how things appreciate so fast now.
well, just because something is listed at a certain price doesn't mean that it's worth that. It's worth whatever someone will buy it for.
Right, I know, but I'm just saying it's surprising how fast prices go on out of print books.
Yeah, and no one will be buying those once the reprint comes out. Who was it? Matthew Jaffe. Do I have that name right? Did the cover for the new Mr. Gaunt edition, and it looks really, really great. So anyway, I wanted to let people know that. So keep an eye out for that. I think that's next month. Is that what John said, guys? On Thursday? I can't remember.
I wasn't.
Anyway, there's that. Now in the show notes, of course, I've got a link to When Things Get Dark. And I've also got a link to a book called, you can unmute and take it from here, Pete,
The Miskatonic University Spiritualism Club.
by Pete Rowlett.
Might be wrong.
So tell us about this book and when it comes out. And I do have a link to pre-order it.
So the book comes out at HP Lovecraft Film Festival, which is Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So like I'll be signing books next weekend in Portland. And then, if you pre-ordered a signed copy, we'll be shipping it out then.
Well, let me jump in there. If you pre-order a signed copy, the person who's ordering the book can also ask you
For
You know,
personalization.
what
Yep.
to inscribe to them.
Yeah.
So,
Hold on one second. Someone's at the door?
so anyway, there's that. Also, I can't believe I've had these for so long while Pete's checking his door. I've had these for so long, and I haven't linked to them for so long. But if you're a fan of Lovecraft eZine, which I assume you are if you're listening, I've also got a link at the very bottom of the show notes to Lovecraft eZine wallpapers, desktop wallpapers, which I'm sure you can amend to your phone too if you wanted, but for sure your desktop. And there's like half a dozen of them. So I know Pete has them on his computer and he alternates them every day. So
Yes, of course I do. To be clear, my computer is, I think, pushing 15 years old and is limping along.
I'm amazed you even get on Zoom. The trade will even get on Zoom.
If I hold the computer too long, I get electric shock off the chassis. So
tell us about the book and repeat the title.
The Miskatonic University Spiritualism Club. So this is a weird story. What happened was I wrote my next novel, which is called The Eldritch Equations. And I put it to bed and I said, I'm done with this phase of these characters. I'm going to write the next book. And then a friend of mine got me a shirt from Arkham Bazaar. And it happened to be the Miskatonic University Spiritualism Club. It's a whole work shirt for it's got a little planchette, and it's based on a Ouija board. And it's beautiful. I love it.
The cover is beautiful too.
I will get to that.
Okay.
So in one weekend, inspired by this t-shirt from Gwen and Brian Callahan, who run Arkham Bazaar and the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival, I locked myself in a room and wrote an entire novella.
To be fair, someone else locked you in the room and it had padded walls, but
Yeah, well, that happens all the time. That's like once a month when the moon is full, and
when the moon is full. I speaking of that, I was going to mention later, but I'll continue. But I'm reading the last Werewolf. What a great book.
Yeah,
anyway, go on, Pete.
So yeah, I locked myself in a room and I churned out a novella, and it's basically the idea is that Miskatonic University has lots of clubs, and one of those clubs is the Spiritualism Club, and they go on adventures to investigate hauntings. And the university has decided that they no longer want to risk sending out their students unescorted. So they hire my detectives, Megan Halsey and Robert Peasley.
But the kids love us, Dr.
Exactly.
Bankman.
Yes.
Burn in hell, Bankman.
They hire my detectives to escort them on their latest adventure. Now, they wanted to go to the witch house in Arkham, but they couldn't get permission because it's going to fall apart. So, and then they've tried to go to Dunwich, but there are no more ghosts in Dunwich, and they don't understand why. But so finally,
have left.
What's that?
The Whippoorwills are all gone.
I have this idea, and it's probably going to show up in a story, but I'm just going to put it out there that Wilbur's brother eats ghosts.
Okay.
But he's like the trap in Ghostbusters.
Yes.
The light is green, the trap is clean. So
Right. But so the idea there, Rick, is that there are no more ghosts in Dunwich, and that the only thing left, the only legends that Dunwich has left anymore are the Whateleys. So it's both a physical event and a spiritual event. But anyway, that's besides the point. So anyway, they go. The club goes to investigate a haunted house, but it's Lovecraft country, so it's not just a haunted house. It's a little bit more. And I have a lot of fun with it.
is this a novel or a novella?
It's a novella.
Okay.
It's short. You can read it in one sitting. I had a lot of fun with it. I've stolen a lot of characters from around weird fiction. And Vincent Price is a huge influence on this story. And somebody will eventually figure that out, why that's true. So anyway,
Is that because of Scooby-Doo?
No, it's
Some other reason.
I'll just let it out there. Almost every male character in the book is based on a Vincent Price character.
Okay.
So
Nice.
yeah. So yeah, if you can, there's a few that aren't, but most of them are. So I had a lot of fun with that. So I wrote this and I just put it away because I didn't know what to do with it. And I was shopping Eldritch Equations, and Dan Sauer at, I'm sorry, I got muted. Dan Sauer at Jack and Express fell in love with Eldritch Equations. And I said, oh yeah, by the way, I should tell you I have this novella. And he's like, well, let's put out Eldritch Equations in 2022, and we'll do the Miskatonic University Spiritualism Club at the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival for Halloween and Christmas, because it's a Christmas story. So we did that.
Yeah,
And-
Sean Hamill blurbed the book, and he said one thing you could do if you wanted was to, buy it now, but wait to read it until Christmas Eve.
Right. It's literally set during Christmas.
And you've got some nice blurbs from some very high-profile people. Sean's one of them. So
yeah, the funny thing is, I sent it to Sean, and Sean wrote back to me, and he's like, "Dude, this is like Nick and Nora Charles versus the Mythos," and I'm like, "That's exactly what I wanted to do." I love all the Thin Man stories, and if you followed my career, Reanimatrix is a rewrite of a film noir called Laura, and Eldritch Equations is going to be it's inspired by Rex Stout's A League of Frightened Men, also by A Long Line of Dead Men. So there's that. But
right.
Who wrote A Long Line of Dead Men?
Lawrence Block's A Long
Lawrence
Line of
Block.
Dead Men?
Yeah.
You're kidding me.
Nope.
Oh man, that's one of my favorite Matthew Scudder stories.
And
Yeah.
League of Frightened Men is one of my favorite Nero Wolfe stories.
So basically, I'm not going to tell you the character, anything much about Eldritch Equations, but a guy comes to the detective agency and says, I was in this class at Miskatonic University, and this person is dead, 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 and this person is dead. There aren't a lot of us left, and that can't be coincidence.
Right. This is Eldritch Equations.
This is Eldritch Equations.
Which is kind of the plot of, and it's not paranormal at all, which is kind of the plot of A Long Line of Dead Men by Lawrence Block with
Right.
Detective Matthew Scudder.
And also League of Frightened Men in Singapore.
Yes.
Pete, I don't want to divert from your story, but just briefly, unless you think I could do it better, I think you could probably do it better, but explain the plot of A Long Line of Dead Men.
I have not read it in 15 years.
All right. The plot of, and I've read it probably 5 times over the years. The plot of A Long Line of Dead Men is at the beginning, this guy, he's in insurance or something, this is a respectable guy. And he comes to Matthew Scudder and he says, I think I have a problem, but I'm not sure. So basically, what happened was he's like in his late 40s or in the mid 50s, something like that. And when he was in his 20s, this old guy, Homer somebody, gathered, I believe, 29 young men ranging from like 20 to 32, something like that, but all fairly young. And the idea was to celebrate the passage of time, to realize that we're all going to die, that eventually everything ends. And it's not to celebrate death really, but to celebrate life and remember that you don't have forever and that you come from a long line of dead men, and that all of your ancestors are dead. And so what they do is they meet once a year at this place and eat steak dinners and whatnot. And they don't really, they aren't really friends or anything beyond that. And whatever they do, they have to commit that no matter what, they can't skip a year. So what this guy in the insurance business starts to realize is that about half of the guys are dead, 25 years or so later. I'm getting a few of the details wrong, but you get the gist. And if you do the numbers, this many people should not be dead already.
Right.
Some people have died of natural causes. Some people have been hit by cars, that kind of thing. One was murdered. And so he starts to suspect, that someone is very, very patiently, I mean, over decades. What kind of person must this be? Over decades, has committed his life to slowly and very slyly knocking down these guys, this club. The other neat thing about the club is that Homer claims that it stretches back to antiquity. That whenever the last young man is the only one left, then he gathers 30 other members and starts the whole thing over again. And he tells them, if you're the last one left, 60, 70 years from now, this is your responsibility. And he reads the name at the very first meeting, he reads the names of the 30 that started with him. And then he burns the list, throws it in the fireplace, burns it, never mentions the names again. And so that's the idea behind it, that it's taken decades for anyone to even realize that there's a serial killer that's focused just on their group. And then, of course, they realize that if this is true, it's almost certainly one of them. So it is a really brilliant, original idea for a story. And I highly recommend that you read the Matthew Scudder books. They're very, very noir, and that you read them in order. But if you don't, that's okay. If you want to just read A Long Line of Dead Men, all you really have to know is that Matthew Scudder is basically an unlicensed private eye, and used to be a cop. So, and that's all you really need to know. It's a really original. If you think about it, correct me if I'm wrong, Pete, but it's a pretty original plot.
So Block extends it back further than, it had been done previously. League of Frightened Gentlemen does something very similar.
Yeah.
Can I give a short summary of League of Frightened Gentlemen?
Absolutely.
Very short. There was a group of guys in college. There was an accident. A fellow student was crippled, and everybody who was involved in that accident was quickly being murdered.
You're muted, Pete, but Kat says that she really, really, really needs this book.
Which book? League of Frightened Men, Long Line of Dead Men, or The Eldritch Equations?
I don't know, but I don't think she means A Long Line of Dead Men. Probably Eldritch Equations or the Spiritualism Club. So.
Okay, so getting back, so Spiritualism Club. So I show that to Dan, and Dan's like, okay, let's do that as a promo for the book. So it's literally sort of like this. It takes place in between the end of Reanimatrix and the beginning of the Eldritch Equations.
Historian's note.
What's that?
Historian's note.
Yes. And it's inspired by this T-shirt, and here's the secret thing. I've actually got another story in the works inspired by yet another shirt from Arkham Bazaar. So we're working on that. But it just came out of nowhere, as inspiration does sometimes. And we're going to see it this weekend. So Dan, who is also an illustrator and book designer and publisher, he sends me this beautiful artwork for the cover. And it's just this sort of generic house looming into the sky. And it's really, really good. And I say, hey, I really love this, but I send them a photo. This is the house that I based the story on. And it's called the Crag in Krag.
And that's what's on the cover now.
And so then he took that and he put that on the cover, and it's beautiful.
It is a very beautiful cover. Now, the most important question of the day. She says the Spiritualism Club, of course.
Okay.
Most important question of the day is, do I get, as a friend, do I get a inscribed copy of this?
Yes, we'll get you a copy, of course.
Okay. Because I will buy it. I'll support you. I'll buy it if I need to.
No,
we're telling everybody about it. Now, when does it come out? Because the link that's on the show notes, you can pre-order it right now.
Right.
When is it available?
So I'm going to assume Saturday and Sunday. I'm on this Saturday and Sunday in Portland. I'm going to be signing copies and inscribing those copies for whoever's ordered them.
All right.
And then I'm just going to assume that Dan will start mailing those out next week, the week after.
And there will be a Kindle version coming sometime in the near future.
There will be a Kindle version. Dan's not big on Kindle, but he's going to make it work. And he added a international mailing option as well, which, over the last 2 years, international mailing has just gotten way out of control. So
will you sign my Kindle copy?
I will sign your Kindle copy if you send me your Kindle. So
anyway, again, I do have a link to this in the show notes, and it's a pretty exciting premise for a book. Beautiful cover, and it's by Pete Rawlik, which means
it's gonna be
really all you need to know is that it's by Pete Rawlik. But great premise, and go ahead, just please, like I said with Ellen's books, go ahead and pre-order it, because that means so much especially to independent publishers. Pre-orders mean so much to them. It really helps them gauge the interest.
Right, and
it's also very encouraging emotionally,
And that's one of the things we're doing with this is that we're using this as sort of a teaser for what Eldritch Equations is going to be like.
All right.
And we hope to have Eldritch Equations out for Necronomicon 2022.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I've got an outline that I like for the book after that. So yeah, it's everything is coming together, and I'm really happy. Jackanapes Press just really blindsided me in the last couple of years. They've just done some beautiful books for Opperman and Ashley Diocese, Adam Bolivar. I just read Adam Bolivar's new book, and I was just blown out of my chair. Just really good stuff.
What book?
The Eton Falls of something Court, and it's about a descendant of Jack the Giant Killer who lives in Boston.
Oh, neat.
And fights supernatural creatures pre-1900, I think.
Okay.
But really good.
Well, again, the link is in the show notes, and please pre-order it. Support Pete, but more importantly, you're also going to be getting a beautiful book, and you can get it inscribed from Pete personally to you as well.
Yeah, and this is something I don't usually do. I prefer to do inscriptions, in person.
Yeah,
But it's COVID, and
sure, we got to adjust.
we got to adjust. So, and maybe, just maybe, I'll doodle stuff in there too. Little monsters or something.
All right. Well, moving on. I posted on Twitter yesterday, and there's a lot of interest in this idea. Now I'm speaking to the writers out there now, and what I wrote was, for the remainder of 2021, at the very least, whatever story, if you're, in our field, in the horror field, weird fiction genre, Lovecraftian, whatever, all this that ties us all together. If you're writing a short story, a novel, a novella, whatever you're writing, try and include, don't try, just do it, include a pickle somewhere in the story. It doesn't have to be integral to the plot. The guy could be, your protagonist could go be eating a sandwich in a diner and says, make sure it has extra pickles or something like this. Because we're trying to get under Paul Tremblay's skin, and it's working already. John Langan has suggested a pickle anthology dedicated to Paul Tremblay. So let's see how many stories we can get out there with pickles in them. So I don't know. Paul said no, but he retweeted it. So I think he wants us to do it.
So I have a story coming out soon that revolves around
Pickles
haggis.
revolves around what?
Haggis.
Of course it does.
Do you know what haggis is?
I used to. I just forgot. That's all.
Yeah, it's stuffed sheep stomach.
God.
Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway.
Probably could see what pickles has to do with that. But
No, it's just I was focused on food.
I thought you were going to go for a hummus kind of theme, but I guess not. So, all right. I'm reading a book called It's been out for about a decade, but I finally got around to it. Called The Last Werewolf, and it's really, really good. Actually, I'm can't stop reading it. Of course, you have a print copy. That's what you're doing, right? You're going to hold up a print copy of The Last Werewolf.
I do have a copy of The Last Werewolf someplace by Duncan, right?
Yeah. Glenn Duncan.
Yep.
Anyway, it's really, really good. But the other neat thing I found out about it when I was reading it is that this book has its own soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you go on Amazon Music, if you have a membership, or if you got Spotify membership, and you type in The Last Werewolf soundtrack, there's actually a soundtrack like would be for a movie or something. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. It's pretty cool. I really like the Lupine Waltz track. So anyway, it's a really good book. I highly recommend it. Apparently, it's one of three. First of three. The other thing I'm doing is rereading, because I do this about once a year, once every 2 years, is I'm rereading Displaced Person.
Wait, how do you have 2 copies of that?
Because I bought these before I told everybody about it. at, you know, like for $5 a piece. And then when I got on the show and I'm telling everybody like this is one of the best cosmic horror stories you'll ever read, now they're like hundreds of dollars on Amazon because everybody went out and bought one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do know.
Do you have a copy?
I do not.
I can. Have you read this?
I have read it a long time ago. And
Well, if you want to read it, I'll send it to you. I got to put a lot of insurance on it, but I'll send it to you.
No, it's okay. You keep it.
But the paperback has the coolest
Right.
cover.
Right.
No. But yeah, I've talked about this before, but it's look up Displaced Person, you know, on Goodreads or whatever, and you'll get the basic plot synopsis. But it was written in 1978 by an Australian author. I read it when I was probably 10. The protagonist is 17. You could say it's written for high schoolers, but it's also written in the same sense that Harry Potter is written for kids. Plenty of adults read Harry Potter stories. They're nothing near the same, but you get my gist. It's just a really I think it was my first cosmic horror story before I understood even what cosmic horror was. So
$644.
wow. That's probably for the paperback.
That's for the paperback.
Yeah. Yeah. When I don't look right here, Ziploc bag. When I don't have these out to show off to Pete, they're in or I'm reading them. They're in the Ziploc bag. So,
yeah. All right. So what I was getting from the shelf was
no, wait. I have a question about Displaced Person.
sure.
This is as it pertains to my Patreons. I can't get a hold of anybody that has anything to do with Lee Harding. It's been almost 50 years, right? 45 years since this book has been written, and it's a pretty rare book.
Yeah.
So if I read like a chapter a week to my Patreons, not putting it out there for public consumption, what do you think of that morally? Because I don't know if I know the answer to that.
So have you tried, you know Chris Sequeira, right?
No.
Yeah, you do. You said he does the Lovecraftian collections from Australia. You had me do an introduction for him.
Oh, right.
So
Okay.
I would ask him first if you say the author's Australian, maybe he knows something we don't.
Because obviously, I am big on crediting.
Yeah.
Anything. Everybody. You don't steal somebody's stuff. Okay. You don't put an image on the internet on your Facebook page and not say, hey, this is who created this, and not only that, here's a link to their website. You have to do these things. At the same time, it's a story that deserves for more people to read it. So I don't know. It'd be a nice perk for my Patreons, but I'll do everything I can to find out. And at the end of the day, I always want to do what is right, not what's easy. So
All right. So he was born in 1937. Displaced Persons has also been republished as a book called Misplaced Persons.
right, I knew that. I do not have that edition.
And so he was very prolific. He's got his last book came out in 1983.
Yeah, I think he wrote a lot of different kinds of books. I think I'm not for sure, but this might be his only sci-fi book. And it's not really sci-fi. I mean, it's rooted very much in the real world, and then these strange things happen.
So ISFDB has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sci-fi novels by him.
Oh, okay, I'm wrong then. Thinking of somebody else.
But yeah, no, he's interesting.
Well, you're good at this stuff, Pete. Maybe you can help me track this down, and if I could get permission, that'd be great.
He did an interview in 1985 called Beyond Tomorrow for Australian Sci-Fi. So,
All right. Will you help me with this?
Yeah, I'll see what I can do.
Okay.
All right.
It would be. I think it would be a cool perk for the patrons if I read like a chapter a week, but I don't want to do it if it's not the right thing to do.
You should see about republishing.
Yes, that thought crossed my mind as well. But even if I did get permission to do that, I would still want to read it to my patrons first, just because they keep me going, and give it to them ahead of time, if that makes sense. So, Chelsea Goodwin says, "How do I buy a copy of Eldritch Equations?"
So Eldritch Equations hasn't been published yet. It will be out probably in August of 2022. With what is it? Necronomicon in Providence. But soon. We have to pace these things. All right, so Mike.
Yes.
This is what I was pulling off the shelf.
All right. Say something, because I can't see it.
It is New Maps of Dreams, edited by Cody Goodfellow and Joseph S. Pulver.
That's right.
That's right.
Right. Who published this again?
PS Publishing.
Right. And this is out now, or is that an advanced copy?
I believe it's out now.
Oh no, this is the one I had. They were going to send it to me, and I said, "Send it to Pete. He'll appreciate it." I mean, I want it too, but
yep.
I think your answer was like, hell yes, instead of just
it was
yes.
Hell yes, yeah, because this is on my list to buy. So, yeah.
I was grinning when I sent the email. I'm like, Pete, would you like to review this one? And
I mean, even if it was, it's
2.5 seconds later, I had an email back.
It's like Michael Sisko, Karen Warren, Damian Angelica Walters, S.P. Miskowski, Mahitabel Wilson, J. Prakash-Satamurthy.
Have you read it yet?
What's that?
Are you reading it now?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I have to finish writing a book review, and I'm about halfway through Body Shocks.
I have two reviews that are done that I need to publish on the Lovecraft eZine website. One is by you, and one is by Logan Noble. So if you're listening, Logan, I've not forgotten you. Not Logan Davis, but Logan Noble. If you're listening, I've not forgotten, and I've not forgotten you either, Pete. Thank you for reviewing that. Sherlock Holmes: The Dreaming Man. Are you aware of this? By William Meikle.
I am. I'm not sure it's Lovecraftian.
No, it's just it's Sherlock Holmes, so it's paranormal, so it's worth mentioning.
Yes,
he wrote a Sherlock Holmes story with had a Cthulhu mythos background.
Yes, and
go ahead. I don't remember what the title was. I said I don't remember what the title was. That's all.
Okay.
This is Sherlock Holmes: The Dreaming Man.
Right. So there's a very similar story called Sherlock Holmes and the Dreaming Detective.
Oh, okay.
Which is Sherlock Holmes in the Dreamlands.
Well, I did not put this in the show notes, but if you Google,
that's by Ralph
Vaughn. Right.
Yeah, but this one's not. If you Google Sherlock Holmes: The Dreaming Man, William Meikle, Meikle.
Yes.
I'm sure you'll find it. It's from Weird House Press. It's Joe Morey, by the way.
Right.
It's really great stand-up guy, stand-up publisher.
I have
And
a
there's
whole-
the exterior art is great,
Mhm.
and the interior art is great. There's interior art as well.
I really enjoy Michael's work. I have a whole shelf full of it.
Oh yeah.
He's consistently puts out decent stuff.
Picard 2, season 2 is going to be coming out at some point in the near future.
Mhm.
And Guinan is going to be in it. Rick?
Yeah, I've seen the trailer. Q, Guinan.
Yeah. I wonder how they're going to explain Q looking older, because I saw him. He's probably just going to say he feels like looking older, since Picard looks older. So, Guinan's very long lived. And of course, Q is basically a god. You guys ever listen to, it's on Audible, Spock versus Q, where they have a debate?
No, I don't.
It's
No.
really cool.
Just to get back to something, Sherlock Holmes: The Dreaming Man came out some years ago because I have it in Kindle. It's
Oh,
a
do you?
sorta-
Maybe this is a new version. I don't know.
Yeah, it was sort of Professor Moriarty uses mythos magic.
Okay. So, Rick, have you seen Midnight Mass yet?
No.
And I know you haven't, Pete.
Nope.
It's 7 episodes. I'm on episode 6 of 7. It's Mike Flanagan. As I mentioned before to Ellen earlier in the show, I just loved Bly Manor. I thought it was I think it's near perfect.
Is this Netflix?
It is Netflix. Yes.
Well, I'll eventually watch it.
Midnight Mass. So far, I'm kind of underwhelmed, to be honest. And maybe there's going to be a kick-ass ending, and that will make it worth it. I don't know. I'm probably going to finish it tonight. Later on.
Have you ever watched Doom Patrol?
Not yet. No.
The 3rd season started, but I'm not too much. They had posted 3 episodes. I liked the second one, but the first and the third. The first wrapped up. The first I didn't like as much because it wrapped up half the cliffhanger too easily, and then the 3rd episode was like a pilot for some new superheroes.
So anyway, Midnight Mass. Chapel Wait is good, based on Stephen King's Jerusalem's Lot, but a lot of liberties taken, which it's a good show so far, so I'm fine with it, I guess. I think that's all I've got, unless you guys want to recommend some books or movies or TV shows, or tell me what you're reading.
I binge watched a show called Brand New Cherry Flavor, which has to do with.
Sounds like a commercial.
It does. It's set in Hollywood, and it has to do with South American magic. And a woman gets her short film and screenplay stolen by a producer, and she seeks revenge. And it's all her revenge magic all revolves around South American imagery and monsters.
Pretty good.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of body horror in it. As a sort of payment, she has to vomit up kittens.
Jesus.
Yeah. So. Yeah.
What the fuck?
Well,
There's a content warning for you, babe.
Yeah, there's your
ladies
content
and gentlemen.
Yeah. She gets paid in kittens. And at one point she just says, "I'm not going to vomit up any more kittens for you." And
But haven't we all said that at one time or another?
Well, the witch says okay, and then the kittens have to come out some other way. So.
Oh my God.
So yeah.
You just talked me out of reading this.
It's I think it's 8 episodes on Netflix.
Although I'm not so far at least impressed with Midnight Mass, I do want to say something about Mike Flanagan. You know, of course, Absentia was very cosmic horror. His first movie.
Yep.
He was really tickled when I told him it seemed Lovecraftian, because he said he's a huge fan of Lovecraft. Everyone talks about, if there's ever a At the Mountains of Madness movie made, you know, Del Toro. I actually think that not a movie shouldn't be made. First of all, it should be a miniseries.
Yeah.
Where they could take their time with it. It should be a period piece. And I think Mike Flanagan would do a great job with it.
You know, I watched what was it, The Terror,
Yeah.
and all I could think about was all these sets could be just used
Yeah.
for a period piece of At the Mountains of Madness.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. But you know, I mean, I know he's a Lovecraft fan. I wish he would do something with that.
yeah, it's public domain too, so it'd be relatively easy to.
Right.
So.
He still follows me on Twitter, and you know, but
it would have to be.
Who knows if he checks his DMs or not?
It would have to be big budget and
yeah, well, I mean, it would be, because Netflix keeps throwing money at him. So
right. You know, honestly, I think looking at what Mike has done, a mini series of Dreams in the Witch House might work better first.
That's been done and redone.
It's been done once.
It's been done horribly.
Yeah.
Or at least I haven't seen a version of Dreams in the Witch House that I liked.
No.
I should mention, in regards to Midnight Mass, that the majority of people disagree with me. It's got a 94% score on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, you're just wrong. We've all been there.
I wouldn't go that far. And a 75% average audience score.
Yeah, listen, years ago I reviewed a book and I said I absolutely hated this book. It was the stupidest thing I've ever read. It gets economics and science and politics wrong. And that year it won the Hugo. So, you know, what do I know?
Well, that's why I'm careful to, you know, on my site, and I've said this to you, Pete, we don't review books that we don't think are very good, because Lovecraft eZine's got a wide reach and it's subjective.
Right.
You know, I may not like something that most people will like. And so then we review somebody's first book and we say it's terrible, but it's not really terrible. It's just that we didn't like it.
Right.
And we really hurt someone, and I'm not going to do that.
Right.
So
no, you're right. You're right. You know, when I was training to do book reviews, Dave Hartwell made it very clear to me that you have to find all the good things and the bad things in the book. Somebody liked this book enough to spend money to publish it.
Mm-hmm.
So what was that? Why did they like it? And that's a good point. So
yeah. Does anyone know when Picard season 2 is supposed to come out? February. That's great. I loved the first season, and it was Michael Chabon. Am I saying that right?
Yes. I think so.
He's a big Lovecraft fan, and it turned out to be quite Lovecraftian, didn't it, in the end?
Right.
You guys disagree?
Oh, I totally agree.
I agree. It did. And Chabon is a big fan of Lovecraft.
Right.
And you know, he's name dropped Lovecraftian stuff in most of his works.
You know, I started to get an inkling when one character, she goes, I wish I didn't know what I know. I wish they hadn't told me. And I'm like, forbidden knowledge, man. This is Lovecraftian stuff. and then the very end, which I won't spoil for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, but I'll just say this: the machines are in a shape that they didn't have to be in. They could have been in a different shape. You know, that's obviously deliberate. So, anyway.
No. The only thing I'll say is I wish that the special effects in that last scene were a little better. The computer graphics are not as good as I would like them to have been.
I was okay with it.
Yeah, it's okay. I just wish it was a little better.
Well,
Anyway.
that's all I've got, guys. Thanks for being here today. Anything else we need to mention real quick?
You watching What If? Either of you?
Yes.
I watched the first 3. I need to watch the rest, but I like what I've seen so far.
They went back to comedy mode last week.
Oh, did they?
And it was kind of, I enjoyed it because it needed to change the pace. It was getting very depressing.
Yes, but then it ended on a very down note.
Yeah, but that's a setup for episode 9.
Yeah.
Which will be 2 episodes later.
All right. Well, thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
I'm a little behind because of circumstances on getting the audio versions of this podcast up. So, expect this week to have several of them come up so that I can catch up. Like the next one is Richard Chismar and I talking about chasing the boogeyman. I do know that I love the video viewers. I love the live viewers, but I do know that the majority of people who consume this podcast do it audio only, so they can listen on the go and in the car and working out and all that kind of stuff. So I'm sorry I got a little bit behind, but I'll correct that this week. Things are getting back under control. And yeah, we'll have another Old Time Radio Tuesday night at 9 Central. And go from there. So
I will not be here next weekend.
yeah, you'll be at the convention.
Yep.
Yeah, I didn't. It just went right under my radar, and I can't go right now for various reasons. So anyway, thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Not just you being here, but your friendship, and thanks everybody for watching. Thanks to the Patreons. We'll see everybody next week. Good night.
Good night, everybody.